Mods can get the most out of games. Emulation can make games easier to get, especially since physical copies of older games can run up to £1,000 to buy, because the world is now terrible. Mods and emulation are two different things, but they share a lot of similarities, the biggest one being they make things better. So of course the game industry doesn't like them. Video games. Hello everybody, Stephanie Sterling here from the internet that time. You know, as I did today's video, God's sake. I had a really nice intro all set up. And just as I was thinking in my head, wow, I sound really professional and like I've got it together, I went, bleh. Anyway, as I did today's video, I was thinking about the shifting attitudes in games media toward emulation. Now, when I started in the business, emulation was considered a taboo topic. I've talked about it on this very show in the past. The games press would not acknowledge emulation a lot of the time. I can't remember the actual website, but one of them was absolutely pilloried and made a pariah for like a week because they dared to mention that ROMs were freely available compared to the overpriced ROMs that Nintendo was selling, and you could get them in a better format with more features, which was true and did deserve to be said. And these days you get games media reporting on entire Bloodborne emulations, and that is what tipped me off to the main thrust of today's inspiration. It's not Dynasty. At one point in this video, it's going to look like I'm talking about Dynasty Warriors again. I'm not. Okay? Definitely not. Only for like a couple of minutes. God, you know, I could not imagine going back to this game any other way now. Mods are great.
Fireman coming to the rescue. He's got his own built-in pumper to save the day.
Look, sometimes a game you love is full of bad ideas and poorly thought out mechanics. Sometimes a game you love suffers from the three big bad Bs: buggy, broken, and Bethesda published. It can be especially true that even brilliant games lose some of their luster over time, especially as time moves on and new standards in game design are adopted. This is doubly especially true with games we would properly dub retro. You know, games from such eras as the "how the hell do cameras work in 3D games" period, or the "what the hell is a quality of life" feature years. No, I don't like that games I used to just call old games are now officially retro games. Saw a YouTube video a while ago where the adult host said he used to watch his mum play The Suffering. What does he mean? It's only a few years old. It's only a few years old.
Dingling spy hides in the shadows and discovers your secrets with his hidden camera.
I've been getting back into playing some of these old games that are definitely only a few years old, and phew, anyone who's dragged out their old what was that noise? Phew. I wrote phew in the script, but I panicked when it came to reading it out. Anyway, anyone who's dragged out their old PS2 can tell you how poorly some of the classics have aged. Sure, a handful of them might be popular enough and cared enough about by their publisher to get a remaster with modern updates that do such things as fix cameras and add quality of life features the original versions lacked. Most are not so lucky. Well, they're not what the fuck now? Jesus Christ, this recording has been hell. Well, they're not officially lucky. We players of definitely not ancient video games are in luck, however, because even the most obscure ones tend to have at least one or two people devoted enough to tinker and toy with them. Actually, let me just see if... it's going to go on gamehacking.org and put in Red... Holy shit. Even Red Ninja has mods. Red Ninja, End of Honor. You don't remember it, you shouldn't. Holy fuck. Infinite health, one-hit killed boss. Holy shit, this might legitimately make Red Ninja, End of Honor playable. Sorry, I've gone completely off script. Zilla isn't gonna like me for this.
Actually, the one I feel worse for is Laura, who has to subtitle all these ad-libs. I'm just adding to the problem, aren't I?
While they may never get the care they need, or in Red Ninja's case deserve, from their so-called rights holders, hackers and modders are more than happy to lavish attention on the unloved, sometimes to such a degree as to give them an entirely new lease of life. Also, some of these mods can double as accessibility features. In the general timeline of the video game industry, accessibility is a relatively newly embraced topic. I mean, sure, we've had subtitles and the odd colorblind mode over the years, and a handful of standout developers were doing more, but accessibility as a wider adopted consideration has only been embraced in, say, like the past 5 years or so. And a lot of older games are just harder than they used to be, not always by design, and not always for honest reasons. Like Lion King, trying to make you rent it multiple times from Blockbuster by being nearly impossible to beat. If we're talking about the features of, say, basic emulation, there are quite a few games I'd never play again if I couldn't quick save the bastards. So yeah, having the ability, if not the official freedom, to tinker with, modify, alter our games for the better is, well, better. They can be overhauled, updated, modernised, made more accessible. What a difference a few strings of letters and numbers added to a text document can do to elevate a video game. If for some reason you doubt the importance of mods, say 3 times into a mirror that you've just downloaded Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl and watch as a swarm of bees flies out of the glass, all of them loudly declaring at you which mods you need to install to make the game playable. Speaking of, it's not just old games, you know. Stalker 2 is the latest of many contemporary games that quite possibly require mods to bring them up to standard. Like, I know it's miraculous a Ukrainian dev got that game shipped, all things considered, but holy skeletons, playing that thing vanilla on an Xbox was horrific. And then there's Bethesda. Yeah. So, not to bang on about Dynasty Warriors again, I know I've been doing that a lot, but my recent experiences with the older games in the series are highly relevant to the subject we're looking at today, and tie into current events concerning a certain critically acclaimed game from a certain beloved developer that certain fans have certainly been certain that a release on a certain platform is almost certainly certain. Just another year or two and that Bloodborne PC release is definitely gonna happen. So here's the thing about Dynasty Warriors 3. It's my favourite game in the series, but as a 2001 game made by a developer that often has a unique idea of what constitutes good gameplay features, it has more than a few problems. One of my pipe dreams is for Dynasty Warriors 3 to get a remaster. Sure, Bloodborne would be nice, but does it have cut content as worth restoring in a re-release as this quality cheese?
You know, boats seem kind of nice, don't they?
Boats are awesome.
A ship is a beautiful thing.
What's so good about this? It's pirates, eh?
What the? Pirates?
Pirates? Ooh.
Just who the hell are you?
You know, you make me sick. You're nothing but an eyesore.
I cannot allow pirates like you to roam free.
I have nothing to say to filthy, dirty vermin like you.
My gift to you is a beautiful death.
Huh! That's what you get for getting in Lubu's way, you scum!
Yes. Just leave it to us.
If you stay here much longer, I'm gonna run out of patience with you!
Such bounty would ensure riches. Excellent. You cannot win. Do you desire further bloodshed?
Surrender, maybe?
No sir, it does not, sir. By far, the absolute biggest detriment to Dynasty Warriors 3 is a terrible lock-on system that would be a bad idea in most games, let alone one designed around fighting many enemies at once. This terrible feature was in 2 and 4 as well, because it somehow took them 3 games to figure out it was bad, and I don't know why they didn't immediately realise how awful the thing was. Yes, it still upsets me. No, I'm not emotionally unstable. Well, not with my meds anyway. Oh shit. Basically, the first enemy you hit while attacking locks you in the direction that enemy was stood in when you hit them. The rest of your attack string, should you keep attacking, will be forced in a straight line. And note that I said the direction they were stood in. You're not locked onto the enemy you hit, which would at least be something sensible. No, it's the direction. If the enemy dies, you're still locked until you stop and self-correct. If the enemy is knocked out of your path, which happens frequently, you're still locked in. Unlike later games, and indeed almost every action game ever, there's no way to freely move as you attack. Well, you can do it until you hit something, then your character gets put on rails. Considering attacks in Dynasty Warriors are performed by stringing together sets of normal attacks followed by a strong attack, you can hopefully see, even if you haven't played a Dynasty Warriors game, what a bloody ludicrous setup this is. Oh, and sometimes the directional locking will rarely and unpredictably change course if it hits something else, so even if you position yourself to account for the lock and hit as many enemies as possible in a straight line, you might just veer off course anyway. I'm not over it. The result of this awful idea is that pretty much any character's moveset is about half as effective as it could be, with some moves being downright useless as lining them up correctly is all but impossible. Even worse, being unable to turn around while attacking means even the most basic enemies can hit you from behind, which in the earlier games was something they'd constantly do. You can even see them behind you as you attack, knowing you're helpless, because as soon as you finish the combo you're on, or if you stop and try and turn around, you'll be battered to bits by a crowd of little shits. By far, the single biggest thing I've wanted a remaster for is to be able to play my favourite Dynasty Warriors game without an incredibly objectively stupid game mechanic that adds fake difficulty and kneecaps a significant part of the roster. So anyway, I added a mod the other night that gets rid of it. Michael of the Muso Warriors Discord has been making mods for old school Dynasty Warriors games for years, as well as offering fixes and digging up cut content like those aforementioned cutscenes.
Fields? I don't like them.
I stumbled on the mod quite by accident as I was just looking up the directional locking simply to see how many complaints or potential in-game workarounds were online. The outright removal of the lock-on is very literally a game changer. God's work has been done. I cannot accurately articulate how immediately and considerably better the game becomes once that mechanic is disabled. Look at what this mod did to Zhang He, who's supposed to be built around maneuverability, and now he can actually maneuver. Cao Cao with his mook insta-killing weapon equipped is an absolute monster now that he can steer the multi-hit move that does the killing. Anyone with a shockwave projectile or a narrow move that requires finesse benefits immensely, and it becomes apparent very quickly how much of the game's cheapest difficulty came from one single badly designed mechanic. It took me over 20 years to see that, over 20 years to play Dynasty Warriors 3 the way I always wanted, and I owe it all to the work of a modder who stepped in to fix it. Oh, and I can pick items up while on horseback now, which was also something a Megaforce hadn't thought of back then. Mods make games better. At least the good mods do. The nude ones just make games nuder, which is sometimes better. I think very few of us would challenge that notion. The former one, I mean. And well, the latter one too. As I said earlier, there are plenty of games lacking the quality of life or accessibility features that either make the experience a bit better, or in the case of Dynasty Warriors 3 and others, offer an improvement so significant as to be downright transformative. Developers aren't stupid, of course, but sometimes stupid ideas or oversights make their way into games. Devs are in the thick of development after all and can't see the wood for the trees always. Or they're Bethesda, who, well, who knows what the hell's wrong over there. Modders have the benefit of distance and freedom from release schedules to spruce stuff up, and in the case of retro games, they can apply modern quality of life standards that just hadn't been conceptualized at the time of development. Modded games quite literally enjoy the benefit of hindsight, and sometimes Publishers are just dicks who stop support for their products or see no profit in fixing a problem. Sometimes audiences scream for an updated version of a game, but won't ever get it unless one of their own steps up and does it themselves. Mods make games better. In the case of many older games, they can make them go from nigh unbearable to refreshingly playable. I like to think I've always supported their existence, but after playing the version of Dynasty Warriors 3 I've always wanted, I'd go to war for the very idea of modding. Unfortunately, the game industry itself has a history of not seeing eye to eye with modders. This is an industry obsessed with control to a literally dominating degree after all, and modding represents control being taken out of corporate hands and into those of the very last people they'd want to have it. When they're not outright clamping down on mods, publishers are trying to seize the means of modification and monetize them for their own gain. God damn it, Zilla. It's a particularly gross irony that the company that's gotten the most grace thanks to mods is one with such a history of trying to ruin them. Let's face it, a big part of why Bethesda's gotten away with releasing games so broken any other dev would be pilloried for them is that a community of modders are up to their elbows in every new release's guts on day one. With a laundry list of broken quest lines, balked physics and outright crashes, Bethesda games almost seem launched with the attitude that modders will fix them. Yet time and time again that company hasn't been able to help itself, attempting to score extra cash off other people's efforts to fix the busted rubbish they are already profiting from. The short-lived paid mods debacle with Skyrim in 2015 saw Bethesda try to officiate their distribution with a pay-what-you-want model in which the publisher got the lion's share of the cash. 45% to Bethesda, 30% to Valve, 25% to the modder. Couldn't even let him have a full 30. After this collapsed due to immediate backlash, Bethesda would slink back with a paid mod system that Bethesda claimed wasn't paid mods, but only seemed to not be paid mods because Bethesda was refusing to call them paid mods. In 2023, paid mods were definitively back with the Verified Creator Program, a system that persists, albeit contentiously. Then there's the Doom stuff from last year, which was just bloody dumb, letting anybody upload mods without attribution or credit really just hammered home how little mods were respected by a company that perhaps most benefits from their existence, and involving a series that most thrived off them. It is Doom. Mods kept that first game relevant for decades, and last year wasn't even the first time that they've tried to phase the Doom modding community out. The only word for it is ungrateful. I was excitedly streaming my modded Dynasty Warriors 3 when I heard the latest chapter in the story of the game industry's relationship with mods. It was fitting news to hear while I was celebrating modification, giving the game that got me into gaming a new lease of life. I am of course talking about Bloodborne. See, this video isn't about Dynasty Warriors, and Sony's decision to pull a much applauded mod 4 years after its release. It's an especially barbed issue considering fans have rather famously pleaded for a PC version of the game for over a decade, or at the very least yearn for an updated PS5 remaster that gets Bloodborne running at a grown-up frame rate of 60 instead of the novelty frame rate that is 30. In lieu of any official movement from Sony, it was up to the world of modding to supply what was demanded. Before the mod's removal, it was quite feasible to make Bloodborne run at a handsome 60 FPS instead of an acoustic 30 thanks to Lance McDonald. Lance is a popular modder and he's 1/3 of what I started calling the Sleepy 3. That is, he makes videos on digging into and breaking and generally mucking about with Dark Souls games that I like to watch at 2 AM when the insomnia's taken hold, the other two being Illusory Wall and Limit Breakers. And by the way, all of their fascinating content, like genuinely interesting stuff and stuff that lets you learn how video games are put together, often with digital duct tape, all that's done using the tools that create the mods that are so valuable that the game industry doesn't really like. 4 years ago, Lance delivered what had been asked of Sony for years and years and years, allowing players to enjoy Bloodborne at a frame rate that makes it objectively better, instead of the frame rate your mum has at home. The other day, Sony said nope, and threatened Lance with a good old-fashioned cease and desist. PlayStation, more like poop. Bunch of Strides in PS4 emulation were made in big ways during the latter half of 2024. It's not like you can just get something like Bloodborne up and running fuss-free, and even if you put in the hours necessary to make an emulation work, it would be, well, not particularly good as far as playable reproductions go. Even so, the progress being made by Shad PS4 is stunning, and the mere possibility of getting Bloodborne on PC at 60 FPS, instead of the frame rate you swear has never happened to you before tonight, was cue for a fanbase frenzy, though one has to acknowledge that the more things like this get talked about, the closer a publisher gets to shutting that shit down. This is often the case with fan games, some of which do the same spiritual job as the emulation and the mods we've talked about, meeting an unmet demand. Before Sega deigned to deliver Streets of Rage 4, we had a fan-made alternative that got a ton of love, until Sega spotted it and had it crushed. That's why my advice has always been that if you've made a fan game or indeed anything cool based on something a game publisher owns as so-called intellectual property, keep it on the down low. One might argue that regardless of opinions and feelings, companies have to file these takedowns to protect their IP. But I think it's downright ludicrous that trademark and copyright laws haven't been updated to cover the many advances in media, and sadly the only changes those with influence are interested in making are those which make things even more draconian. For example, companies like Disney fighting tooth and nail to extend the time it takes for work to become public domain, because heaven forfend they don't own all things in perpetuity forever. And it isn't just mods or emulation, is it? Nintendo has had a long history of both refusing to release games overseas and fighting against imports to ensure fans can't get them legitimately. While less of a problem these days, Nintendo's past efforts to ensure that, say, Animal Crossing would stay region-locked in every sense of the word is certainly remembered by this Brit, who saw the company routinely withhold games from Europe and attack any means of importing them. This is another realm in which modders have proven their immense value. They're the reason for many, many RPGs being enjoyed outside of Japan. There are so many RPGs and other types of games that were never localized but received unofficial fan-made patches that translated them and made them playable without needing to learn Japanese. I speak as someone who loves Sengoku Basara and laments the fact most of the series never left Japan. Knowing fan patches exist makes me rejoice that I won't have to keep playing the games while holding my frigging phone over the screen with a translator app running and telling me the item I picked up gives you 0 attack power, but as a trade-off, it gives you 0 defense power. If publishers had their way, however, these games wouldn't have a worldwide audience. They wouldn't have modern updates that make them more playable. They wouldn't have mods, not unless they got their monetary cut at least. They wouldn't have accessibility features, which is going to be a problem, because what I've heard through the grapevine is that publishers are starting to pull back the advances they made in accessibility because they made their token effort and now it's not worth it to them anymore. The recent scaling back of inclusivity across the board lately is fucking cowardly and pathetic, and modders will have to step in, as usual. The game industry's relationship with modding really disproves the idea that our economy is based on supply and demand, right? I mean, I think the past 5 years should have made it clear that across every industry, the executive class is incapable and unwilling to provide the things they're ostensibly in the business of providing, the useless little freeloaders, but heaven help anybody else does what they should be doing. Supply and demand has never been the design. Companies supply what they choose to supply and litigate the existence out of anything that meets a demand they won't. And that is why Bloodborne is still officially capped at a dial-up frame rate. A Ryanair frame rate. The lazy Sunday wank of frame rates. Let's face it, if modders provide all the remastering to a game before the game gets an official remaster, what does the publisher have to offer if ever it does officiate a remastering? I mean, for decades I've wanted to be able to control my attack movements, pick up items on horseback, and enjoy an HD upscaling of Dynasty Warriors 3, and I can just have it, instead of needing the remaster I used to wish for. Of course publishers balk at our ability to just do that with games both old and new. Heaven forbid anyone realise that publishers are gatekeepers gatekeepers way more often than they are providers, and that there are ways to bypass their gates and cut them out of the process. But make no mistake, when an unmet need is demanded by enough for long enough, they will seek alternatives. They won't be content with the frame rate you'd fuck on a wet weekend in Reigate. I cannot overstate how extremely happy a mod made me this past week. Certainly happier than any game publisher has managed to make me in the past 20 years. Sorry Sony, they just do things for me that you're not equipped to do. Brilliant. Brilliant. That about wraps it up, I think. Basically, emulation and mods, and I know at points in the video it sort of conflated the two, but they are two very related topics. I should point out that even though I was talking about an emulated version of Dynasty Warriors 3, which I'm not ashamed to admit, a lot of those mods actually work on the PS2 as well. So, yeah, mods are great. Seriously, trying to go back to Dynasty Warriors without that lock-on disabled, couldn't do it.